October 8th, 2012. The U.S. Army has a problem. They have the most advanced firewall on the planet. They have satellites that can read a license plate from space. They have a defense budget of $600 billion. But they have a blind spot. To train their pilots, the Army needs a flight simulator for the AH-64 Apache attack helicopter. They don't build it themselves. They hire a third-party game developer to do it. And that developer just made a mistake, a fatal one. They left a digital bridge open, a bridge connecting the secure military servers to a public gaming network. At 3:14 a.m. in a dark bedroom in Perth, Australia, a teenager named Dylan Wheeler isn't sleeping. He isn't a spy. He isn't a terrorist. He's just bored. He's scanning the internet for unreleased video games. He wants to play the next Call of Duty before anyone else. He follows a signal. He crosses the bridge. He expects to find a game. Instead, his cursor hovers over a file that shouldn't exist outside the Pentagon. AH-64_flight_control_.ISO. This is the flight software for an $18 million war machine. At this exact second, Dylan has a choice. If he disconnects now, he's just a kid who took a wrong turn. No one knows he's here. He can go to sleep, wake up, and go to school. But Dylan doesn't disconnect. He hits download. And just like that, a teenager in his underwear becomes a bigger threat to national security than a foreign government. But here is the scary part. He wasn't the only one watching. This is the story of the Xbox Underground. To understand how a group of kids accidentally invaded the Pentagon, you have to stop thinking of the internet as a cloud. Think of it as a skyscraper. The ground floor is the public internet. It's where you and I live. It's YouTube, Google, Xbox Live. It's crowded, it's loud, and it's safe. But if you have the right key card, you can take the elevator up. The middle floors are the corporate networks, Microsoft, Activision, Epic Games. This is where the work happens. It's harder to get in here, but not impossible. But then there is the penthouse. In 2012, Microsoft had a secret network called PartnerNet. PartnerNet was the VIP room. It was a hidden ecosystem where game developers uploaded their prototypes years before the public ever saw them. It was a digital vault containing billions of dollars of intellectual property. If you're a gamer, getting into PartnerNet is like breaking into Willy Wonka's factory. Unlimited access, unlimited power. And Microsoft believed it was impenetrable. They spent millions on encryption. They had 24-hour monitoring. So how did Dylan and his crew get in? Did they use a supercomputer? Did they brute force the encryption? No, they found an unlocked window. It's called an SQL injection. It sounds technical, but the logic is embarrassingly simple. A website is basically a conversation between you and a database. You type your password, the database checks it and says yes or no. But if the code is sloppy, you can trick the database. Instead of typing a password, you type a command. You type a specific string of characters that confuses the system. You force the database to panic and vomit out its entire user list. That's what they did. They poked the walls of the website until they found a soft spot. Then they pushed. The wall collapsed. Suddenly, they weren't just looking at the login screen. They were looking at the admin panel. They had the usernames, they had the passwords, they had the keys to the penthouse. Now imagine the feeling. You're 14 years old, you're sitting in your bedroom. You log in and suddenly you have access to everything. Halo 4, Gears of War, games that won't be released for another 2 years. For months, this was their playground. They were ghosts. They downloaded games, played them, and laughed about it in private chat rooms. They were invisible. But there's a problem with unlimited power. It gets boring. Playing the games wasn't enough anymore. They wanted to see what else was on the servers. They started digging deeper into the directories, past the games, past the source code. That's when they found the Zombie Studios folder. Zombie Studios was a mid-tier game developer. They made shooters, but they also had a side gig. They were a contractor for the US Army. And because Zombie Studios was lazy, they stored their military projects on the same server as their video games. When Dylan found the Apache flight simulator software, the smart move was to run. This wasn't a game. This was international traffic and arms regulations. This was federal prison. But hackers like Dylan don't run. They collect. They view data as a trophy. He downloaded the software. He cracked it. He even tried to sell it to his friends. Hey, you want to learn how to fly a gunship? He thought it was funny. The FBI did not find it funny. Because while Dylan was laughing, a silent alarm had already tripped in Washington. The agency knew the data was gone. They just didn't know who took it. They started looking for a Chinese spy ring. They started looking for Russian operatives. They had no idea they were hunting a kid who was currently failing math class. But Dylan made a mistake, a classic one. He got comfortable. He looked at his screen, at the terabytes of stolen data, and he thought, I own the network, but I want something I can hold. Downloading the software was a felony, but what they decided to do next wasn't hacking. It was insanity.
You are secure in your digital tunnel. You are anonymous. You are safe. So why would you risk everything to walk into the lion's den? Because of the white whale. In 2013, the Xbox One, codenamed Durango, was the most secretive piece of hardware in the tech world. Microsoft had it on lockdown. It was physically stored inside the heavily guarded Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington. Dylan and his crew, the Xbox Underground, wanted it. But you can't download a console. If they wanted the Durango, they had to cross the line from cybercrime to physical burglary. This brings us to the most absurd moment of the entire operation. The plan wasn't sophisticated. It was barely a plan. Two members of the group, let's call them the runners, flew to Seattle. They didn't have guns, they didn't have lockpicks, they had a badge cloner they bought on eBay. Here is the competence porn of the physical world. Most corporate security is theater. It relies on the assumption that people will follow the rules. The runners stood outside the Microsoft building during the morning rush. Hundreds of employees were streaming in, coffee in hand, sleepy, distracted. They used a long-range RFID reader, a device that scans the radio frequency of employee badges from a few feet away. They stood near the entrance. Beep, they caught a signal. Beep, they cloned it to a blank card. That was it. That was the haste. They now had a working key to the Microsoft headquarters. But having a key is one thing, using it is another. Every second you are inside that building, you are rolling the dice. The runners walked up to the turnstiles. There are armed guards, there are cameras. If the light turns red, it's over. You are on the ground in handcuffs in 30 seconds. The runner taps the cloned card. The light turns green. Click. The turnstile opens. They're in. Now, look at the map of the campus. It's a maze. They have to find the specific hardware lab where the prototypes are kept. They walk through the hallways. They wave at employees. Good morning. Morning. No one questions them. Why would they? They have badges. They look like young interns. They find the lab. They walk in. And there they are, the Durango development kits, the White Towers. These machines haven't been seen by the public. They are worth thousands on the black market, but they are priceless for bragging rights. They disconnect the cables. They shove 3 massive consoles into their backpacks. They turn around, they walk out. Past the lab manager, past the break room, past the armed guards at the exit. They walk out the front door, get into a car, and vanish. This was flawless. It was perfect. It was the problem. When you struggle to steal something, you respect the danger. When you walk into Microsoft and rob them blind in broad daylight without even wearing a mask, you stop fearing the system.
You start to think you are untouchable. Back in Australia, Dylan Wheeler is ecstatic. He has the military software, his friends have the hardware, he has beaten the army, and he has beaten Microsoft. The hubris kicks in. Dylan starts putting the stolen Durango on eBay. He starts leaking screenshots of the Apache software. He isn't hiding anymore. He's performing. He thinks he's the main character in a movie. But he forgot how movies like this end. Because while the runners were high-fiving in Seattle, and while Dylan was counting his eBay bids in Perth, a new notification popped up in their private Discord server. A new member wanted to join the group. He seemed cool. He knew the lingo. He wanted to buy some of the stolen data. They let him in. They showed him the helicopter software. They showed him the pictures of the stolen Xboxes. They bragged about how easy it was. They didn't know that this new user wasn't a gamer. He was sitting in a cubicle in New Jersey, and he was recording every single keystroke. The trap didn't snap shut at once. It closed slowly, inch by inch. The FBI didn't rush in. They waited. This is the part that drives you crazy when you look at the logs. For months, the FBI watched Dylan commit crimes. They watched him sell stolen goods. They watched him distribute military data. Why? Because they were building a RICO case. They didn't just want Dylan, they wanted the whole network. They wanted the kids in Canada, the kids in Indiana, the buyers in China. They needed a wire, and they found one. One of the members of the Xbox Underground, we'll call him the Mole, had been compromised on a separate charge. The FBI gave him a choice. Option A, go to prison for 20 years. Option B, go back into the chat room, wear a wire, and get everyone else to confess. He chose option B. The tension in the group started to rise, but for the wrong reasons. They weren't afraid of the police, they were afraid of each other. They were fighting over money, they were fighting over credit. Dylan was becoming erratic. His house had been raided by local Australian police for a different hacking incident, but he was still free. He felt invincible. He taunted the police on Twitter. He posted pictures of his setup. He didn't know that the friend he was chatting with every night was feeding his IP address, his passwords, and his confession directly to a federal agent. Then came the morning of the knock. It wasn't a knock, actually. It was a battering ram. Across the globe, the raids happened simultaneously. In the US, SWAT teams kicked down doors in 5 different states. In Australia, the police surrounded Dylan's house. Imagine this scene. You're asleep. Suddenly, your room is filled with flashbangs. Men with assault rifles are screaming at you to get on the ground. They aren't looking for drugs. They are ripping your computer out of the wall. They found everything. The Apache software, the FIFA source code, the stolen credit cards, and the logs, the chat logs where they confessed to everything. The perfect system of the Xbox Underground collapsed in seconds. But the ending of this story isn't a courtroom drama. It's a tragedy. The American members of the group faced the full weight of the US justice system. David Puchara, one of the leaders, became the first foreign hacker ever sentenced in the United States. He stood before a judge and realized that pressing a button has real-world consequences. He went to federal prison. Sanad, another member, fell into a deep depression and took his own life before he could be sentenced. The pressure of facing the federal government was too much for a kid to handle. And Dylan, the protagonist, the architect, he ran. He fled Australia. He couldn't enter the US. He became a fugitive, bouncing between countries that don't have extradition treaties. He escaped the cell, but he's trapped in a different way. He can never go home. He can never stop looking over his shoulder. So what is the legacy of the Xbox Underground? Did they change the world? In a way, yes. Because of them, Microsoft rebuilt their entire security infrastructure. Because of them, the US Army overhauled how they handled third-party contractors. They forced the system to evolve.
But look at the cost. These weren't hardened criminals, they were brilliant engineers. The kid who figured out how to clone a Microsoft badge with an eBay tool? That's genius. The kid who mapped the SQL injection to breach the Pentagon? That's world-class talent. If they had waited, if they had applied for a job, they would be running the cybersecurity divisions of the companies they robbed. They would be millionaires. They would be heroes. But they were impatient. They were arrogant. They tried to speedrun life. They proved they were smart enough to break the machine, but they weren't smart enough to realize that the machine always wins in the end. The Xbox Underground didn't steal a helicopter. They stole their own futures. And all for a video game that was going to come out in November anyway.